What would you do if you came home from work and found your porch, the one you built with your late spouse, completely destroyed and your HOA was behind it? This isn't a movie. This actually happened. In this video, you're about to hear the unbelievable true story of how one man took on a corrupt HOA and walked away with $200,000 and something even more powerful, justice. Stick around to the end because the twist in this story you will not see coming. They tore it all down. My entire front porch gone. I came back from work, stepped out of my car with my lunchbox in hand and just froze on the driveway. Where there used to be a cozy wooden porch with 2 white rocking chairs, a small swing, and flower pots my late wife had picked out, there was now nothing but broken boards, scattered nails, and yellow caution tape fluttering in the wind. It looked like a crime scene. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then I saw the orange spray-painted letters on the sidewalk, HOA order. That's when my heart started pounding. I didn't even know what that meant, not yet. But I knew something was terribly wrong. And when I finally got the answers, let's just say someone had to pay. But before I get to how I made the HOA hand me a check for $200,000, you need to understand everything that led to that day. Because the porch? That wasn't just wood and nails. It was my last real piece of her. My name's Dave Miller. I'm 53. I've lived in my house in Green Pines Estates, Virginia, for over 20 years. I'm the quiet neighbor. I mow my lawn on Saturdays, shovel my driveway in the winter, wave to the mailman, and return lost dogs to their owners. I don't stir up trouble. Never been late on my dues. Never got a complaint. I just keep to myself, work at the auto shop, and try to keep my life together after losing my wife to breast cancer 5 years ago. Her name was Sherry. Everyone loved her. She had a laugh that made strangers smile. And she was the one who picked out the porch swing. Said she always wanted to sit outside and watch the sunset with coffee in her hand and slippers on her feet. After she passed, I kept everything just the way she left it. The cushions on the rocking chairs, the wind chimes, even the faded wreath she'd hung on the door. I wasn't ready to let go. So every evening, even after the hardest days at work, I'd sit there, just like she used to, with her old mug in my hand. It helped me breathe. It helped me remember. Now, Green Pines Estates has a homeowners association, but up until this year, they were mostly harmless. Just newsletters about watering restrictions, the occasional reminder to keep trash bins out of sight, that sort of thing. Nothing worth losing sleep over. But then things changed. A new HOA president came in, a guy named Rick Dalton. Rick was one of those people who looked like he'd never had a bad day in his life. Always in golf polos, always flashing those blinding white teeth, always acting like he owned the street. He'd moved in just 2 years earlier but started acting like Green Pines was his personal kingdom. At first, it was little things. He fined old Mrs. Jenkins for painting her fence cream instead of approved beige. He made the Watsons dig up their flower beds because they disrupted the uniform aesthetic. But most people went along with it. No one wanted trouble, including me. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail from the HOA. It was printed on fancy paper and sealed with one of those fake gold stickers. Notice of architectural noncompliance. I stared at the words for a long time before opening it. According to them, my front porch didn't meet community visual standards and had been constructed without proper architectural approval. I nearly laughed. That porch had been there for over 15 years. Sherry and I had built it ourselves weekend by weekend using saved-up money and borrowed tools. I figured there must have been a mistake. So I called the HOA office. No answer. I emailed. Nothing. So I drove down to their office on Main Street during lunch break. The girl at the front desk gave me a fake smile and handed me a form. You'll need to fill this out and request a hearing with the board, she said like she was reading it off a cue card. I went home frustrated but still calm. I wasn't trying to start a war, I just wanted to explain. So I filled out the form, attached photos, and even wrote a letter explaining that the porch had been part of the original house before Rick even moved in. Weeks went by. No reply. I sent follow-up emails. Called again. Silence. Then, one Friday, a second letter arrived. This one was shorter. More aggressive. It stated that due to my failure to remedy the violation, the HOA had exercised their right to correct the issue at the homeowner's expense. I didn't know what that meant until 3 days later when I came home and saw the mess. I stood there in the driveway for what felt like forever. My hands were shaking. Her swing, was gone. The rocking chairs were gone. Everything was gone. The porch was demolished, and all that was left were jagged wood pieces, rusty nails, and a twisted pile of memories dumped near the edge of the curb like garbage. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Just then, my neighbor Kelly walked over, her face pale. She whispered, "Dave, I tried to stop them. I swear I did. But they said it was legal." I looked at her, my throat tight. "Who said?" She hesitated. "Rick. And 2 guys from the HOA enforcement team. They came this morning while you were at work. Brought a crew. Wouldn't even let me call you. That's when I realized they did this while I was gone. On purpose. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my now porchless front step, staring at the empty space in front of me. And I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't letting this go. The next morning, I took a personal day from work. I went down to City Hall and pulled every property record I could find. I found the original blueprints, the permits, the HOA bylaws from when the community was founded. And what I found made my blood run cold. Because buried in those old records on page 42 of the founding documents was a clause no one had paid attention to in years, including the HOA. And that's when it hit me. They had just made a massive mistake. One that was going to cost them. But before I tell you how I used that single clause to turn everything around, let me tell you about what happened next, because things got even worse. 3 days after they tore down my porch, I came home to find something even more shocking sitting in my mailbox. A bill. For $14,870. Charged to me. For the demolition they ordered and carried out without my consent. That's when the fire in my chest turned into something else entirely. I was done playing nice. I stood there, holding that envelope like it was a live wire. My hands were trembling, but not because I was scared, because I was furious. The bill was printed in black and white, signed at the bottom by Rick Dalton himself, and it had the nerve to say, "Payable within 14 days to avoid further penalties." My first instinct was to march right over to Rick's house and give him a piece of my mind. But something in me, maybe Sherry's voice in my head, told me to wait. Think. Don't give them anything they can twist. So I took a breath, walked back inside, and laid the envelope down on the dining table. Then I picked up my phone and called my brother-in-law, Cal. Cal used to be a real estate attorney before he retired, and if there was anyone who knew how to handle shady HOA behavior, it was him. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Dave, everything all right?" he asked, cheerful as ever. "Not exactly," I said. "You busy right now?" 20 minutes later, Cal was sitting across from me with his readers on, flipping through the HOA bylaws and the original property documents I dug up from City Hall. He didn't say much at first. Just squinted, hummed, and flipped pages with slow precision. I could see his legal brain turning, analyzing every line. Then he looked up at me. "They're in trouble." My heart skipped. "You sure?" "Positive," he said. "This clause here, Article 7, Section 3. It states that any structural modification made prior to the 2010 charter revisions is considered grandfathered and protected from architectural review unless it poses a health or safety risk." He jabbed the paper with his finger. "And your porch? Built in 2009. I remember. Sherry sent us pictures." "So, what does that mean?" "It means they had no right to touch it. None. And sending you a bill on top of that? That's reckless. Might even be considered harassment." I blinked, trying to take it in. "What should I do?" Cal leaned back. "We're going to write them a letter. Not just any letter. A demand letter." We stayed up that night drafting it together. Cal was meticulous. He listed the dates, the original permit approvals, the HOA bylaws, and even cited 2 Virginia state cases where HOAs overstepped their authority. Then came the demands: full reimbursement for the destruction of property, emotional distress damages, and the immediate voiding of the demolition bill. The number we landed on was bold: $200,000. "That's a lot," I said, unsure. Cal nodded. "It's not just for the porch. It's for what it represented. And trust me, they'll push back. But this puts them on defense." I mailed it the next morning, certified and tracked. That same day, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was more formal, from their legal counsel. It acknowledged an ongoing dispute and stated that all further communications should be directed to HOA's legal representation. That's how I knew they were scared. They didn't even try to argue, just lawyered up. Days turned into weeks. I went back to work, but things didn't feel normal. I started noticing little changes around the neighborhood. My trash bins weren't picked up one Tuesday. My mailbox was left open and soaking wet after the rain. Then someone left a rolled-up note under my windshield wiper that said, "Just pay your dues and stop whining." I wasn't shocked. Rick had his little circle of HOA faithfuls. Mostly newer residents who believed everything he said. People who thought enforcing rules down to the letter made them better than everyone else. Still, it didn't make it easy. Kelly, bless her heart, stopped by more often to check in. She brought homemade cookies one afternoon and said, "This neighborhood's not what it used to be, Dave." She was right. Sherry would have hated this new vibe, the coldness, the gossip, the cliques. Green Pines used to feel like home. Now it felt like a trap. But I wasn't about to let them push me out. 2 weeks after we sent the letter, Cal got a call from the HOA's lawyer. They wanted to settle privately. Cal told them we'd listen, but on our terms. We scheduled a mediation meeting at a neutral law office downtown. It was set for the following Monday. That weekend I kept to myself. I didn't even sit outside. Too painful. Too raw. But on Sunday afternoon, something strange happened. I was in the garage organizing old tools when I heard tires screech in front of my house. I stepped out to see Rick Dalton, the golden boy himself, stomping across my lawn in his spotless shoes. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he spat, waving a copy of the demand letter. "This is a joke." I didn't say anything. Just crossed my arms. He pointed a finger at me. "You're trying to extort the HOA. That porch was an eyesore and you know it." "It was mine," I said, my voice steady. "And it was legal." Rick's face twisted. "You're going to ruin your own neighborhood over this." "No," I said. "You already did." He stormed off, mumbling something under his breath, then peeled off down the road. I could still smell the burning rubber after he left. That's when I knew he was losing control. Monday arrived and I wore my best suit. Cal drove us both to the law office. Their lawyer was already waiting, a gray-haired woman named Ms. Brewer with a clipboard and zero facial expression. Rick wasn't there. Typical. Ms. Brewer offered us a goodwill settlement of $20,000. Cal nearly laughed. "Try again." The negotiation lasted 3 hours. They danced around accountability, kept saying things like, regrettable misunderstanding and unfortunate miscommunication. But we had the documents. We had the photos. We had the law. By the end of it, Ms. Brewer excused herself for a private call. When she returned, her tone had changed. "We're prepared to offer a final settlement of $80,000, she said. I glanced at Cal. He gave me the smallest nod. "I want one more thing," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" "I want a written apology. Signed by Rick Dalton." She hesitated. "That might be difficult." "Then we're done here." She didn't argue. She just sighed and stood up. When we got home, Kelly was waiting on the sidewalk. "How did it go?" I gave her a tired smile. "Better than I thought." She smiled back, then looked over my shoulder. Dave." I turned. There, parked across the street, was a white van. No logos, no license plate, just sitting there. And then, right in front of our eyes, someone stepped out wearing a hoodie, walked up to my trash bins, and lit a match. The flames leapt fast. Kelly screamed. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't over. It had just turned into something else. I ran. My boots hit the pavement like thunder as I grabbed the garden hose from the side of the house and yanked it across the lawn. The flames had already started licking the plastic of the trash bin. The smell of burning garbage filled the air, thick and toxic. Kelly was on the phone with 911, pacing in frantic circles, her voice trembling but clear. By the time the fire department arrived, sirens howling, neighbors peeking out from behind blinds, I'd managed to douse most of the flames. One of the firefighters, a younger guy with soot on his cheeks, came over to me with a clipboard. "You put most of it out yourself?" he asked, glancing at the melted bin. "Yeah," I said, still catching my breath. My hands were shaking. "You did good. Could have spread to the house with this wind. Lucky it didn't." He paused. "Do you have any idea who did it?" I hesitated. "I've got a few." Kelly gave me a knowing look. She didn't say Rick's name, not yet, but we both knew where our thoughts went first. The police showed up shortly after. They asked questions, took photos, and said they'd review nearby doorbell cameras for footage. But in neighborhoods like Green Pines, most folks don't like to get involved. That meant getting evidence would be harder than proving fire was hot. That night, I sat on my back porch, the only porch I had left, watching the moonlight play tricks in the shadows. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every car that passed made me tense up. Every creak of the fence had me reaching for the flashlight. I didn't sleep much. I just kept thinking. Someone had tried to scare me off. But I wasn't backing down. The next morning, Cal came by with coffee and more updates. "They're willing to go higher," he said, handing me a printout. "New offer, $150,000. I blinked. "That's a big jump. Means they know you've got them cornered," he said. "They want this buried." I didn't answer right away. I kept staring at the burned trash bin at the curb. The scorched plastic was still twisted and black, a scar on my front yard. "It's not just about the money anymore," I finally said. "I know," Kel replied. "But money is leverage. And justice don't come cheap in this country." I told him I'd think about it. I needed time. But time wasn't something I had a lot of. Because later that week, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. Flyers went up around the neighborhood overnight. Bold red letters, "Community protection. Stop outside legal threats." It didn't name me directly, but everyone knew what it meant. I went anyway. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse. Rows of folding chairs, a long plastic table at the front, and Rick finally standing there like he was running for president. He wore his usual smug grin and a fresh polo, hands gripping the sides of the podium like a man ready to lie through his teeth. "As many of you know," he began, "we're dealing with a very unfortunate situation involving a resident who has chosen to pursue legal action against this board. We believe in fairness, we believe in rules, and we believe in protecting the values of Green Pines Estates. But we will not be bullied." I could feel the heat rising in my face. People were whispering, shifting in their seats. Some looked my way. Others looked away. Rick continued, "We will not let one person's bitterness derail the harmony we've worked so hard to build. That's why today we're proposing a new amendment to the bylaws to prevent frivolous lawsuits and ensure board decisions remain final and binding." Someone near the back raised their hand. "You mean we can't challenge you legally?" Rick smiled. "It's just a measure to protect the community from unnecessary conflict." I stood up. My voice was calm but loud enough to cut through the noise. "Is that what you call demolishing a grieving man's porch while he's at work? Unnecessary conflict?" Gasps. Actual gasps. Rick's jaw clenched. "Mr. Miller, this is not the time or place." "It's exactly the time," I said. "You tore down something you had no right to touch. You sent me a bill for nearly $15,000, and when I pushed back, someone tried to burn my property." People started murmuring. Rick looked uncomfortable. "Tell them," I said, stepping closer. "Tell them about Article 7, Section 3. The clause you conveniently forgot. Tell them why your lawyer upped the settlement offer to $150,000. Rick didn't respond. So I pulled out copies of the document and started handing them out. "This is the clause," I said. "This is the law. And this," I held up a copy of the demand letter. "This is what happens when you forget that people still have rights." The room buzzed with tension. Even Rick's loyalists looked rattled. After that meeting, things shifted. People who hadn't spoken to me in months came by with apologies. One neighbor even brought over an old photo of Sherry sitting on the porch, sipping her coffee and smiling. "I thought you might want this," she said softly. But not everyone was on my side. 2 nights later, I woke up at 2 a.m. to the sound of glass shattering. I ran to the front of the house and flipped on the porch light, or where the porch used to be. My front window had a hole the size of a baseball. There were shards of glass on the floor and a rock lying in the middle of the living room. It had a note wrapped around it. 4 words, scrawled in red ink. "Drop it or else." My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't about property anymore. This was war. The police came again. This time it was Officer Grady, a heavy-set man with a kind face and a notepad that looked too small for the mess he was walking into. He examined the broken glass, took the rock into an evidence bag, and asked me the same questions I'd already answered twice this month. "Any idea who might have done this?" "No," I said flatly. "But I've got a hunch." He sighed. "Let me guess. HOA again?" I didn't say anything. Just nodded toward the note still sitting on the counter in a Ziploc bag. Grady took a photo of it, squinted, then looked at me. "You want to press charges?" "Absolutely." He made a few more notes, then looked around the room. "You got a security system?" "Just a doorbell cam." "Upgrade that," he said. "This feels like it's heating up." He wasn't wrong. And I wasn't about to sit back and wait for whoever threw that rock to show up with something worse next time. That same afternoon, I went online and ordered motion sensors, floodlights, a backup camera system, and even a reinforced security door. I didn't have a fancy home, but I wasn't going to make it easy for anyone to hurt me or the memory of what I built with Sherry. Cal was furious when I told him about the window. This is getting criminal, he said. You sure you want to settle with these people? I want peace, I told him, but not at the cost of justice. The next mediation meeting was scheduled for the following week, but this time I came with more than paperwork. I brought photos of the rock, copies of the police report, even audio clips from my neighbor's backyard camera which picked up the faint sound of glass breaking and a car engine speeding away. It didn't prove who did it, but it painted a picture, one of escalation, not resolution. Their lawyer looked uncomfortable. Rick still didn't show. Cal leaned forward, calm but firm. Let me be clear. My client was harassed, his property destroyed without authorization, and now his safety is being threatened. You can either settle this quietly for the amount we agreed on plus coverage for the new window and security system, or we go to court and file for punitive damages. There was a long pause. Then Ms. Brewer stood and said, give us a few days. We left the office. I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. Kelly checked in that evening, bringing over chicken pot pie and a warm hug. I hate what they've done to you, she said. This isn't the neighborhood I moved into. It's not the one I stayed for, I replied. But even in the middle of all that mess, something surprising happened the next morning. I woke up to the sound of voices outside. I pulled back the curtain and there they were. 3 neighbors. One with a rake. One with a hammer. One holding a new potted plant. I stepped outside, still half-dressed, blinking in disbelief. What's going on? The oldest of the group, Mr. Albright, who usually kept to himself, gave a sheepish smile. We figured you could use a little help rebuilding. We might not be able to give you your porch back, but, well, we can start something new. I didn't have words. Just stood there while they got to work. They cleaned up the yard, pulled weeds, fixed a bent mailbox post someone had kicked in last week. Kelly came by with paint, and before I knew it, a handful of other residents joined in quietly without fanfare. Not everyone in Green Pines was bad. Some were just scared. But seeing me stand up, seeing me refuse to be bullied, I think it made them realize they could push back too. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. That feeling didn't last long. That weekend, I got a call from a reporter. Local news. He'd caught wind of the HOA conflict and wanted to hear my side. I hesitated. I didn't want attention. But something told me it was time the world saw what was happening behind the closed doors of suburban civility. So I agreed. We met at a coffee shop on the edge of town. The reporter, Brian, had a recorder, a legal pad, and one of those earnest expressions that made you want to trust him. I told him everything. From the porch to the demolition. The letter. The fire. The rock. All of it. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked, do you think the HOA is targeting you personally? Yes, I said without hesitation. Why you? Because I didn't roll over. Because I pushed back. When the story aired 2 nights later, it didn't just ripple, it exploded. The headline read, Veterans Home Vandalized After HOA Overreach Community Divided. They mentioned Sherry. They showed old photos of the porch. They quoted Cal's legal filings. And they showed Rick Dalton walking briskly to his car, refusing to answer questions. The response was immediate. My phone didn't stop ringing for 2 days. People I hadn't spoken to in years reached out with support. A local carpenter offered to rebuild the porch for free. A law firm from Richmond offered to take my case pro bono if I chose to escalate. But the real blow came when the county stepped in. After the news story aired, a representative from the county code enforcement office came knocking. Turns out the HOA had failed to pull proper permits for the demolition they ordered. That meant fines. That meant public records. That meant accountability. For the first time, Rick's smug little kingdom started to crack. But just when I thought I was finally turning the corner, just when things seemed to be tipping in my favor, I woke up one morning to find a bright red notice taped to my door. It wasn't from the county. It was from the HOA. Notice of eviction proceedings. They were trying to take my home. My knees buckled as I read the notice. Due to persistent violation of HOA rules, legal actions, and behavior unbecoming of a community resident, we regret to inform you that eviction proceedings are being initiated. My heart pounded in my chest. I leaned against the doorframe, scanning the paper over and over like somehow the words would change if I just blinked hard enough. But there it was. In bold letters. Signed at the bottom, Rick Dalton, HOA President. They weren't just harassing me anymore. They were trying to erase me. Kick me out of the home I'd built with Sherry. The same home I'd poured 2 decades of my life into. The same one where she took her last breath. I called Cal right away. He came rushing over, still in his slippers. They can't do this, I said, my voice shaking. No, they can't, Cal replied, his jaw locked. They're bluffing. Hard. But bluff or not, the damage was being done. The letter had been posted in broad daylight, right on my front door, for every neighbor to see. And sure enough, before noon, whispers had started again. I saw curtains shifting, people crossing the street instead of walking past my lawn. It felt like high school all over again, the isolation, the rumors, the fear. Except this time it was my actual home on the line. Kelly came over that afternoon. She didn't say anything at first. Just sat with me in the kitchen while I stared at the paper in silence. Then she reached across the table and put her hand on mine. I'll testify, she said softly. Whatever you need. I looked at her. They're turning people against me. Then we turned the truth on them, she said. You're not alone. She was right. The next day, Kel filed a legal counterclaim. It accused the HOA of abuse of power, harassment, property destruction, and now unlawful eviction attempts. He included copies of the porch permit, the demolition invoice, the security footage, the news story, and the fire report. We filed everything. Officially. No more letters. No more private mediations. We were going to court. As news of the lawsuit spread, something strange started happening. More neighbors, people I barely knew, began reaching out with stories. A couple down the street had been fined $2,000 for installing solar panels without approval, even though the city had authorized it. Another woman had been forced to remove her child's wheelchair ramp because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. An older man, Mr. Lee, told me Rick had threatened to place a lien on his home over chipped exterior paint. One by one, they stepped forward. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to fight for my home. I was going to take down the whole crooked board. Kel began drafting a class action suit. We gathered testimonies, photos, letters. We reached out to a non-profit legal organization that advocates for homeowners abused by HOA boards. They joined us. And they brought with them something the HOA hadn't expected: media coverage. It snowballed. The local news returned. Then the regional stations. Then a national outlet picked up the story: HOA tyranny when the rules go too far. They ran a photo of me standing beside the ruins of my old porch, arms crossed, a broken swing at my feet. The caption read, "They demolished his porch. Now he's taking them to court." Rick went into hiding. He stopped showing up at board meetings. His little crew began to panic. Flyers were pulled. Neighborhood forums lit up with debates, some siding with the board, most outraged at the mess Rick had made. Then, in the middle of the chaos, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. It was Sherry's sister, Meredith. We hadn't talked in a while. Life had gotten in the way. "I saw you on TV," she said. Her voice cracked a little. Sherry would be proud. That meant more to me than anything the court could give. But as we prepared for the first court hearing, Rick played one last dirty card. It was a Tuesday morning. I just sat down with Cal in the courtroom when Rick's lawyer walked in and handed us a thick packet. "Countersuit," she said, claiming defamation, emotional distress, and slander. I blinked. "He's suing me?" Cal opened the folder, scanned a few pages, and scoffed. "It's garbage. Desperate garbage. But it'll slow things down." That was their move: stall, delay, exhaust me. Make me too tired or too broke to keep going. What they didn't know was that I'd already lost the most important thing in my life. They couldn't scare me anymore. That night, as I was sorting through more paperwork in my living room, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I didn't see anyone, just a small cardboard box sitting on my welcome mat. No address. No return label. My stomach dropped. I brought it inside carefully, set it on the table, and opened it. Inside was a plastic Ziploc bag full of ash. And a charred piece of wood. It was a piece of my porch. The grain was unmistakable. The edge of it still had part of the carved design Sherry had made with a woodbending pen all those years ago. A swirl of stars and vines, she said, reminded her of her childhood garden. My throat tightened. My hands curled into fists. At the bottom of the box was a sticky note. Just 2 words. "Stay down." That was it. That was the moment I knew, no matter how long it took, no matter how far they pushed, I wasn't backing down. I was going to see this through. And someone was going to answer for all of it. Because the storm wasn't coming. I was the storm. The courtroom was packed. Reporters lined the back wall. Neighbors filled every bench. Even the county commissioner showed up, trying to stay low-key in the 3rd row. This wasn't just about my porch anymore. It was about a community waking up and finally saying enough. The trial had been fast-tracked after the HOA's countersuit got laughed out of court. The judge dismissed it with a single raised eyebrow and a muttered, "frivolous." Now all eyes were on our case, the real one. The one that would decide whether HOAs could bulldoze people's lives and get away with it. Rick Dalton finally had to show his face. He sat at the defense table in a navy blue suit looking like a disgraced game show host. Gone was the golf polo swagger. His hair wasn't perfectly combed anymore and there were sweat stains under his arms. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. Our lawyer, Cal's colleague from the nonprofit team, stood with a binder full of evidence and fire in her voice. Your Honor, this isn't just a case of one porch. It's about a pattern. A deliberate abuse of power. Mr. Miller's porch was legal. It was protected under the HOA's own charter. But they demolished it without notice, without due process, and then charged him for it. When he pushed back, he was threatened, harassed, nearly driven from his home. She walked over to the jury and set down the box. The defendants mailed him a piece of his own destroyed property. As a warning, that's not just cruelty. That's calculated intimidation. The room was dead silent. Then came the witnesses. Kelly testified first. She didn't hold back. She described the demolition day, how Rick and his crew ignored her, how they blocked her from calling me, how they laughed like it was no big deal. Then she described the fire, the rock, the red-letter threats. Next was Mr. Albright, the man who'd helped clean my yard. He looked straight at the judge and said, Rick Dalton told me I'd regret siding with Dave. I told him I'd regret being a coward a whole lot more. One by one, neighbors came forward. People who had once kept quiet now stood and spoke. About their own fines, their own threats, their own humiliation. It wasn't just me they'd targeted, it was anyone who challenged their control. When it was finally my turn, I didn't use a lawyer's voice. I used mine. I built that porch with my wife, I said, my hands gripping the witness stand. We couldn't afford much. We did it slowly with borrowed tools and weekend time. She used to sit on that swing every night with her tea. After she died, I kept it the same because I wasn't ready to let her go. I paused, my voice catching. They didn't just tear down wood. They tore down a part of her I hadn't learned how to say goodbye to yet. And they did it without even knocking on my door. I looked at Rick. All I ever wanted was to be left alone. But now, I want justice. Rick finally took the stand. He was smug at first. Arrogant. Tried to spin the whole thing as miscommunication and community standard enforcement. But then came the hammer. Our lawyer pulled out the email. One Rick had sent to another board member bragging about showing the old man who runs Green Pines. Then another. Joking that I'd probably cry on that stupid swing. The jury's faces shifted. Even his own lawyer looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. The trial lasted 5 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood, paper in hand. We find in favor of the plaintiff, Mr. David Miller. Damages awarded, $175,000. Additional punitive damages, $25,000. Total, $200,000. The courtroom exploded. People clapped. Some cried. Cal shook my hand. Kelly hugged me so tight I almost fell over. Rick sat frozen, lips parted. As the judge slammed the gavel. It was over. Or almost. Because 2 weeks later, the Real bomb dropped. The county issued a formal investigation into the Green Pines Estates HOA. Turns out, Rick had been funneling HOA funds into fake maintenance contracts, including the demolition crew he hired. That construction company, owned by his cousin. Fraud, embezzlement, abuse of power. Rick was arrested. And not quietly. It happened during a special HOA board meeting. I was there. So were the reporters. The deputies came in, cuffs ready, and Rick stood up like he was going to run. But he didn't make it far. The last image I saw of him was in the local paper, Rick Dalton being walked out in handcuffs, red-faced, and mumbling curses. The new HOA board? Voted in 2 months later. Kelly became the new president. And my porch? It's rebuilt now. Better than ever. Sherry's swing is back, her favorite mug still sits on the table beside it. I sit there every evening, just like I used to. Not grieving anymore. Just remembering. Sometimes neighbors wave as they walk by. Sometimes they stop and sit for a minute. Sometimes they say thank you. And sometimes they just smile. Because everyone in Green Pines remembers the day the HOA went too far. And the quiet man who made them pay. If you thought that was wild, hit that like button and let us know in the comments, have you ever had a run-in with your HOA? Don't forget to subscribe for more true HOA horror stories, legal drama, and satisfying revenge tales just like this one. And hey, if you believe in standing up for what's right, share the story with a friend who needs to hear it. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay strong, stay kind, and don't mess with someone's porch.